Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be talking about tones and promises. If you haven't been following along for the past few months, I'm doing a series called Write a Book in 6 Months, and right now I am in the writing process, and with that comes with starting the beginning of my book. And I want to make sure that I set up the right tones and the right promises for the book so people kind of know what they're getting set into. This isn't necessarily like what kind of promise you want to make at the beginning of your book so that your payoff turns out well. That's a whole separate thing I'll probably do a video on. This is more setting a promise for your tone and what people can expect when they're getting into your book and how you do that in the first few paragraphs or pages of your book. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. If you have any questions or anything, be sure to comment below. I would love to be able to help you out, but let's get into talking about setting up your promise and tone. So why even set up a tone or a promise of tone, or what does that exactly mean? Well, if you have seen any sort of writer or musician or filmmaker, anything like that, you usually associate their work with that, and their work is their brand, or they are their brand. So when you pick up like a Brandon Sanderson book, you're going to expect like a mystery with the magic, characters who are dealing with psychological sort of stuff, and they're going to get through it in like a hopeful manner. Like things might be super distressed and terrible, but in the end you're going to have this like hope. Where in like George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, you're going to get people who try to do the right thing and they get killed for it. That's basically it. So when you're about to start your writing journey, I think it would be a really good idea to write down your promise of your brand. And that's sort of what I did before starting to write. I'm going to read out my promise for my brand, and I think that I actually might change it a little bit. So this is not something that's like, okay, it's set in stone, this is all you have to do, but you're going to figure that out as you're writing, and your tone and everything. So since I've already written the first draft of the book, I kind of figure out what kind of writing and what kind of stories that I like to tell. So I'm going to read a little bit of the promise from my brand to you guys to give you an example of what I sort of mean by that. This is like me basically reading this out to my audience, or the people that would like to read my writing, as my promise as a brand. So you're going to get these monsters, you're going to get a cool magic system and mystery behind it, you're going to get diversity, you're going to get large scale battles and even cosmic horror vibes at points. And lastly, you're going to get stories of heroes who are just people. Ultimately, that leaves us with people who give everything, and sometimes it's not enough. And when it's good enough, it comes at a grave cost. That's my promise as a brand. I would probably go back into this sort of little my brand paragraph and add something about like a unique mixture of comedy and dramatic tension that blends well in a story. I'm still trying to figure that out, so that's why I haven't necessarily wrote that in there yet. But that's a big part of my brand that I want to be able to have, is like a good amount of comedic things that are happening, but not undermining the sort of dramatic tension that's going on right now. And in writing my first words of my book, I want to make sure that all that's in my head when I'm going to be pouring out my promises for the book, as well as promises for character, plot, and setting. And I do that with my first chapter of my book is basically the siege of the city that is sort of the catalyst for the rest of the book, and what it means for our characters who are involved with that situation and not necessarily directly involved with that situation. So I'm bringing in a big battle, I'm bringing in magic at the beginning, I'm bringing in our main characters and why they are on the mission that they are. And then I cut away to someone who's not involved with the situation at all and somehow gets tied into it. I know that doesn't really help a lot because I'm not giving you too much information about the book that I'm writing to not give spoilers, but what I want you to keep in mind is this document that you make about your brand, and make sure that it reflects in your book as well, especially the beginning of your book, as well as keeping together your promises that you want to make for the book itself. So those are like two different things: the promises of the book as a story, and then the promises of your brand and how you want to tell your story. Now, it's not hard to do the second one because it'll happen naturally. It's good to just identify it and keep it top of your mind whenever you're writing. So if it helps, I'll read the first 2 paragraphs of my story and see if that you guys understand sort of the tone that I'm going for. It's not 100% perfect. I think definitely could use some tweaks, but I'm trying to play with this comedic stuff that's happening, but not being not undermining the dramatic tension. And maybe it'll help to read the whole chapter, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs paragraphs to show you I'm trying to set up a character that's quirky, but the dramatic situations are still dramatic and they still matter, and it's crazy stuff that's going on. So let me read these first two paragraphs, and I kind of want to get you guys' opinion to see, okay, did this undermine the dramatic tension that was going on? Did you need more to read, or did you see what I'm trying to like go for, and then places where I can improve? So here we go. Chapter 0, The Border War. The play wasn't going exactly how Julian planned it. He wanted to join the military academy in Jeku, rising through the ranks as a prodigy among his peers, gain the trust of his superiors, and quickly take the reins of the Soku military dynasty. That way he could prevent Varanor occupancy in Ithril and stop the oppression of his people. He knew Varanor had a tight grip on their government and policies. No one from the inside could do such a terrible thing to its own people, but Varanor had a twist in mind. A twist Julian didn't expect, but nonetheless a twist. Twist made things exciting, made a play worth watching. It set the stage for a hero to save the day. I don't want to like say what I'm trying to do here, but you guys sort of let me know what with that first paragraph, what's sort of like going on. I think the second paragraph pays off what I'm saying, but yeah, I'm kind of curious of what you guys thought. So what I'm trying to do here is set up my character and his quirk and the way that he views reality. And then my second paragraph is my contrast to that actual reality, what's going on. So the second paragraph goes like this. Julian watched as his brothers and sisters burned to death from inside the city of Jeku. Julian could hear the cries of his brothers, hear the sizzling of their popping skin, and the shrills of death from his sisters. Fira at his side and a squadron behind him, Julian looked at the other conduits of fire bursting through the city gates, like a frenzy of ants. They seemed to be the only ones who made it out. Fira always hated when he treated everything like a play, like a story to be told, but Julian never thought of it that way. No one ever truly understood him, but he understood himself, and that's all that mattered. His life was his own story, and he would make it the best ever told. Though he understood her sentiment, after all, the people he loved the most, his squadron, were all bloodied and filled with ash, narrowly escaping death. The second paragraph is how actual reality is and how other people, or how he thinks other people perceive him. I think the way that I would break that up is after they seem to be the only ones who made it out, I would add Fira saying something to him, along the lines of like, don't think of this as a play, basically. And then I would have him like thinking to himself of like, Fira always hated when he made things seem like a play. But then I added that no one really understands him, but that doesn't matter. He only needs to understand himself. And what I'm trying to do with this character, kind of make someone who's meta, but not to the point where it breaks the story. I'm trying to add a combination of someone who's like Kelsier from the Mistborn series, and someone who's like Abed from Community, where you can still, in Community, you can still have those funny moments and shenanigans and whatever with Abed, but you can still have those really dramatic points happen where you really care what's going on. I'm not trying to go to that extent of Abed where he gets like super meta about things, but I want to use this interest that Julian has in playwriting and storytelling, and use it to be kind of meta in my story, but not exactly meta. And then also have him be this like leader who is trying to save his people, because he doesn't think like life as this is just a story and I can do whatever I want. Little bits of that do sort of happen and spill out of him, but he has his group around him to be able to keep him grounded, and he more just sees life this way so that he can make life more exciting for himself, because he thinks of himself as a storyteller. So with my story, I'm trying to set that tone of terrible things are happening. There's quirky characters that are sort of misunderstood, but can make the story interesting. My biggest problem with this was trying to figure out the right tone, and I still think I'm trying to like figure that out, but keeping in mind my brand and the promises of the story itself that I want to tell. This is how I'm sort of crafting the story right now. Maybe not the best way to do it, but I just need to get other eyes on it and see and what they think, because the part that I had before was a little bit too dramatic. It started with blood on his hands, and he was like wailing and crying, and like it was just absolutely terrible. And then this one's like, well, my play isn't going exactly how I thought. The Varanorans had a twist to it, and the twist is that they attacked the city and killing everybody you loved. Like, right? But it's like, oh my god, this is terrible, but he views it this way. So yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to do in my setup. I'm trying to set up my promises for my story, and then also the promise for my brand and who this character is. Whether that's coming across well or not is remains to be seen. And hopefully if I get an editor or beta readers and they're able to tell me, this isn't really working, let's try try it this way, then I'll be able to know better. But you don't really know until other people get their eyes on it. But that's what I'm trying to do with my beginning, with my tone, with my promises, with my setup. That's what I try to keep in mind. Keep in mind my brand, and keep in mind what is the best promise to tell for the best payoff. And I've talked about earlier about outlining and talking about promises and payoff, and basically using that in this sort of first chapter, because this is the inciting incident for the rest of the book, and this character is very important. Even though it's not my main character, it is someone who will be a main character in my books later on in this series. But yeah, that's sort of it. I hope that was helpful. I tried to use examples from my own work and what I did and why I did it. In conclusion, I basically wrote out what I wanted my stories to feel like when I write them, and made a promise of my brand. So that might help you guys if you write out your promise for your brand and what your books to feel like and read like whenever people read them, and keeping that in mind whenever you're starting your story. But yeah, that's basically it. I will probably go back and revise this. If you guys have any points or any advice, I would love to hear it. I hope this was helpful for people who are getting ready to start writing their books, making sure you're setting the right tone and the right promises for your book before starting. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.